not only in Pinellas, but Tampa Bay. They clearly understand we have a need for better transportation options, that's for sure. All right, action items. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 5th?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So, I apologize for talking while I'm eating, but, on our agenda coming up at our next board meeting, I've asked Brad to put on there the Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Coalition. I know Commissioner Gerard is familiar with it, and I'm pretty sure, Joey, you are as well, because your city signed it. And the initiative going forward this year is to reach out and try to bring the business community to the table, along with our quasi-governmental entities, because we all need to be focused on this issue. If you just think about the impact that Hurricane Michael would have in Tampa Bay, if it were to blow through and just level everything, not to mention the storm surge, it's a pretty overwhelming thought process, and we want to make sure that our businesses are aware of the fact that they need to have a resiliency plan. And that's exactly what we've asked the state of Florida to develop. So I'm hopeful that the board will agree that PSTA can be one of the first quasi-governmental entities to sign on to the compact. Brad?
Yes, well, I would just like to acknowledge Chair Long's effort on this at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and then for reaching out to me to see about PSTA's participation. And the reason that I think it's important that PSTA be joined on as the signatory to this coalition is because quite often I think transportation is not acknowledged by when folks are talking about sustainability and resiliency related to climate change and sea level rise. A recent United Nations study, there's been a couple of studies that have come out recently, but a recent study confirmed that the number one most viable thing that individuals can do themselves to improve the environment is reduce their use of a car. And there's not too many other ways to reduce your use of a car in most areas besides public transportation, riding your bike, alternative modes of transportation. And so I thought it was a great opportunity. Commissioner Long invited me, and I joined her when she presented down in Miami a couple months ago at the South Florida Compact, which is now 10 years old. They're having their 10th anniversary, and they have a little conference every year. On the one hand, it was great for us because we saw what a more robust, what the Tampa Bay might strive for in the future as far as what a compact can do and bring people together. On the other hand, Commissioner Long was like a rock star down there. She was the most, people were coming up and asking for her autograph and selfie photos because we were like the new, fresh entity for them that we were working together in this region. And while they signed their compact 10 years ago down there in the Miami area, maybe they're not, it didn't seem like they were really working together so much. They were mostly kind of just reporting on what each individual group is doing and not as much cohesion. So they were kind of inspired by the Tampa Bay and getting this compact signed. So, and there was a lot of discussion about transit and transportation and how much of an impact that does have on emissions and pollution. So I just think it would be great for PSTA if the board were to approve us being a signatory and then helping lead over the next year or two, as Mr. Long said, about getting the business community involved. It just helps get the message about transportation's role in that out there, I think.
So do we
Great.
need to recommend it to the board, or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I move we recommend it.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then 3C, the FY 2019 bus and parent transit adjustments. I'm surprised Patty's not here for that.
I
Are you
know.
pulling it up there, or?
Yeah, I can.
So I'm going to introduce Heather on this. So our meeting is on the 23rd, in a week and a half. Prior to the PSTA board meeting will be next Friday is the Forward Pinellas Transportation Funding Workshop at St. Pete College Seminole campus. The reason that the workshop is being held is because Forward Pinellas has an obligation to update and approve a new long-range transportation plan by the end of this calendar year, 2019. And so the time is now for Forward Pinellas to decide what transportation modes and what funding levels are going to be included in that long-range transportation plan. Because there's no project that PSTA, Pinellas County, or the Florida DOT, and any surface transportation project needs to be in that long-range transportation plan, or else it can't get any funding. So that's really the basis for this. So it's an opportunity for PSTA, certainly as the transit provider for Pinellas County, to weigh in on our needs. The reason I brought this before the executive committee, and we're going to bring it to the planning committee as well, is that PSTA's forecasts, as you know, show us in a deficit position in the future at PSTA. We have very healthy reserves, and we're doing fine right now, but we are forecast to run out of those reserves. So this is an opportunity. We're very much looking forward to this workshop and the discussions over the next couple of months, especially with the county commission, to talk about what we might do. What I'd like to put on to what I'd like as an action this morning, or this afternoon now, for the executive committee to recommend to the PSTA board essentially the worst case scenario, that we at least authorize PSTA, the board authorize PSTA to advertise for a public hearing, public comment on service reductions in the event that no additional funding is identified. PSTA will have to reduce services, and Heather's gonna kind of explain. They're relatively minor, or as far as having a major impact now, but we're really hoping that we won't have to do that based on the results of the workshop. But we do have to go through a public hearing process anytime we make adjustments, so this at least puts us in a place, and it's subject to whatever happens next Friday and then beyond that.
Heather, before you start, I have a question. How long can we go before this government shutdown is going to severely impact us already now?
Well, Debbie was giving me a report yesterday on that, and it's certainly an issue that we have to carefully monitor. Right now, we're okay, although, as you know, certainly with your experience with PBARDA, but even with PSTA, all of our federal grants are reimbursements. So we spend money, and then we get the feds to reimburse us after the fact. federal government is shut down, so nobody is reimbursing us. As of yesterday, Debbie told me that we were $1.4 million. We have $1.4 million of expenses we've already expended that we are waiting on the feds to reimburse us for, and they won't reimburse us until the government opens up again. Which $1.4 million, 1.4 is not too much money, and PSTA has very healthy reserves, so we're okay. If the government shuts down for a very long time, that number is going to grow. PSA is about to take receipt of a bunch of buses that the board that we ordered a long time ago, or a year ago, and buses are the biggest expenditures that we use federal funds for, and the check is due when the bus arrives. So.
In that situation, oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
In that situation, can we delay delivery, or will they give us the buses knowing that the payment will show up eventually? How do we handle that?
We're looking at our options. We have 45 days, and then we have to accept the bus, and so there's things like that that Henry's right now talking to Gillig about. So if the shutdown drags on till February, March, it's going to become an issue. But for now, we're okay.
Go ahead, Heather.
So I also.
Happy note. Go ahead.
And that's not really, it's not affecting what Heather's about to present.
So I also, in addition to what Brad said, wanted to tie it to this community bus plan that we've been working on over the last year, and then I presented to you on a number of times. Just a little refresh, the concept behind the community bus plan is that you want to invest the far majority of your resources into your best corridors. And so the routes that are the highest performing routes, we would further improve, making 15-minute service all day, making some limited stop services. And then talking about things like the long-range transportation plan, those of you that are on the MPO know that, WID is also planning for different land use changes and increased densities in some corridors. So going out 25 years, we would also want to improve frequencies on corridors like Main Street and Dunedin might become more dense. Park Boulevard, some of those aren't necessarily core routes today, but that will change over time. So in any funding scenario, this was the concept of the bus plan. And so in a revenue neutral scenario, we would cut a good number of our lowest performing routes and put those resources into a few of our core routes. And we have to cut more of the low performing routes because they take less resources. To run a connector route maybe costs us $250,000, $300,000 a year, but improvements to the routes that run on East Bay and 49th might cost $2 million a year. So it takes a lot to improve those. As you know, our expenditures are exceeding our revenues. That does start in fiscal year 2019. This has been, over the past many years, we've had operating budgets that show deficits, but we've been able to realize savings. And so we've ended up not actually having to make the service cuts. We were hopeful that in 2019 we could identify additional savings and we wouldn't have to be talking about service cuts for 2019, that we could make up the smaller $1.72 million deficit. But that does not appear to be the case. We've gotten through the first quarter of 2019 and we have not found any additional savings. And some of that's because we've been doing this for years. We've been for years kind of squeezing everything we could squeeze out so that we can maintain services. The good news is that we are a very efficient agency. Of our bus benchmarking peers, we have the lowest operating cost per vehicle hour. So we can pretty much do, like the agency on the far right, for about the same amount of dollars, we provide double the service. So we're extremely efficient. But unfortunately, we are also one of the lowest funding transit agencies in the country. These are some peer cities based on population and ridership, and we are at the bottom of them in terms of spending per capita. So with that said, we will be going forward presenting 3 options, and this will be presented at the funding workshop and to the planning and tracking the board. One is that if we got no additional funding, we would be looking at service cuts, and I'll just give you a quick picture of what that looks like in a minute. 2, to get us out the next 5 years without being in deficit, we need about $5 million a year. That though, does not give us any extra money to match grants or to do any new service. Then option 3, if we really wanted to provide an optimal transit system, we're talking more in the ballpark of $40 million a year. And back when we did the Green Light Plan, that's about what we were looking at, doubling our bus network. So in terms of service cuts that Brad was mentioning that we would need to have public hearings on, we looked at the bus plan recommendations in terms of the lowest performing routes, the productivity. We also looked at things like, is a route grant funded? It doesn't really do us any good. 2 of the connector routes are some of the lowest performing, but they're 100% grant funded. So cutting those is going to cause a lot of pain, and it's not going to give us additional dollars to put elsewhere. So these are the routes that we've identified. So one connector, the Safety Harbor connector, that does remove all service from Safety Harbor, however. And then there's the Route 58, which serves Carillon, Bryan Dairy Road, and St. Pete College. Route 22, which is 22nd Avenue North in St. Petersburg. This was actually created back a few years ago when we cut routes 1 and 30. We didn't really entirely cut them, we combined them and made this Route 22. Well, it's still not a high performer. Route 16, the northern portion of that, north of 38th Street, we see a drop off in ridership, so we would reroute another route to cover the southern portion and eliminate the northern portion. And then Route 5 travels on 5th Avenue North in St. Pete, and it's kind of similar to 16. We see a big drop off west of Grand Central, and so we would eliminate that portion and effectively run between Grand Central and downtown on 5th Avenue North. So the other side.
Yeah, paratransit too.
Oh yeah, and then paratransit, we were looking at some places we kind of grandfathered in locations that are outside of our ADA required 3/4 mile buffer, and so Shore Acres and pretty good portion of North County, East Lake would be affected. That would save us maybe $100,000 to $200,000. So we're looking at that as well. And the other side, oh yeah.
Can I back up for a second? You know, all those cases, is there an alternative that people who rely on those routes can get to fairly easily?
Yes, there are parallel. Route 22, there's not really a parallel service. There's service on 38th Street, so it's quite a distance. We do have direct connect stops we put at either side of Route 22 to try to get people over to routes 4 and 34.
Okay.
Route 5, there's a parallel route. 16, there's a more frequent Route 9, and we may already see more people walking over to 9th Street or to MLK instead, because it comes every 30 minutes versus every 60 minutes. And then Bryan Dairy Road, there's not a parallel corridor, but what we see is more ridership on the north-south routes, and I guess people walk over to their jobs near the hospital and some of that, because we do have transit riders at the call centers that are near the hospital, but they're telling us they use the more frequent north-south routes. Safety Harbor, there really is not an alternative. That would be the one other than direct connect to get people out to another route. And then the other side of the coin is, you know, with additional investment, we would be able to put, like I said before, more service in those corridors that are transit supportive. We'd be able to provide more than just our lowest wage workers, but kind of that next tier, income level tier of workers, more an ability to potentially eliminate a car from a household and really improve their economic mobility. And then the regional services that are often talked about, they're very expensive to provide. We would look to do that because we do believe those connections are important. One other point we wanted to make is that we are constantly getting requests for more service. We get requests from riders, obviously, non-riders. We get people saying, why don't you go to the airport with more routes? More trolley services. Why is Jolly Trolley Coastal not 30 minutes? Why does it come every 60 minutes? And then a lot of our local jurisdictions ask us for service. A lot of them want trolley services to bring people from the beach to their main streets and the like. So we would love to provide all of these, but we just don't right now have the ability to do so. And that is all I have.
So wait a minute. Are you saying Treasure Island has asked for more service?
Yeah.
Aren't they
But
one of
aren't
the
they one
cities?
of the five
Aren't they one of the
cities?
cities that don't pay ad valorem for PSTA?
They are.
They have some nerve.
That's kind of interesting.
All right.
Yeah, and Gulfport, similarly, we've had some issues with the Gulfport City Commission with regard to service. So that's interesting also.
They were interested in it. We met with the city manager, and they were interested in some kind of trolley
Right.
from the beach. But I don't know which commissioners. We met directly with the city manager.
Yeah, I represent them. So.
And same with Seminole, we met with our new city manager, newer, and it was the same story of trying to get people over to the Seminole Mall.
Mhm.
Oh, what a pity.
Hmm.
So, as Brad said, I guess what we're looking for is a recommendation to the board to authorize us to hold public hearings on some of these service cuts, should we not get direction at the funding workshop or following the funding workshop about what we can assume in terms of future funding.
Yeah, I mean, I would doubt that we're gonna have any answers after that, but
Right.
Yeah.
It's a sense of
maybe a
direction.
better idea
Right.
what
Well,
we're willing to pursue.
we have to show that we're anticipating financial issues,
Mhm.
and so therefore it puts us out in front of the concerns that citizens are gonna raise because we're doing it in advance, so we're telling them what the problem is. And under this current administration, I don't see a lot of funding shaping up, so we'll see what happens. But I don't see where we're gonna come up with any magic numbers like 40 million. That's a pretty big number.
That's referendum territory.
Yeah.
So again, obviously, we don't want to make these cuts.
Right.
And this is going to affect people.
Sure.
The paratransit, the Shore Acres and the East Lake, people have signed up for DART that have disabilities that have no other transportation. By definition, they are unable, because of their disability, to drive a car or ride the bus even. And the law, the ADA law, does not require PSTA to provide them service. It does not require, because we don't have any buses that go into Shore Acres, so we don't have to do it. But there's an assisted living facility in Shore Acres. There's more than one up in East Lake, off of McMillan Booth Road, that they will have direct connect. I mean, those who can go in a car and pay more money, but people are going to be affected,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're not going to do anything immediately. We're still looking at every possible way to save money, but we're pretty much at just planning for the future. And I know that nothing's going to happen at the workshop. It's just a workshop. And I know there's discussions going on at the Tourist Development Council about tourist-oriented funding related to our trolleys and things like that. And there'll be certainly discussion at the workshop, and I think at the County Commission, about penny for Pinellas, the gas tax, and other types of revenue.
Surface transportation.
Surface
STP.
transportation. Oh, yes.
Our cut on the gas tax keeps going down, correct? Because there's not that much, people are using smaller cars or more efficient cars, and the gas tax is really not a good source of revenue in that kind of an environment.
If you come to the workout, you'll see that the county's projections on the gas tax is for it to still go up. They're projecting, because of the improved economy, and we've seen this, car ownership is up. More people are buying cars, and they're buying SUVs. And so the gas tax revenue total is going up. The rate at which it is growing is not going up. It's declining. But for now, in the good economy, and with gas prices at record lows, it's still going up. Not very much.
We have issues already, I don't know about the cities, but covering our transportation needs with the gas tax that we have.
Right, that's,
So we,
yeah.
of course, have to vote to increase it.
Mhm.
Whether that generates enough money to be meaningful is another question.
Mhm.
I'm sure Raheem is gonna say what it is, what,
He will.
I haven't looked at his presentation yet.
It's in there.
Hmm?
It's in there. Yeah, we've seen this presentation.
No, I know he's in there.
Yeah.
We actually got something from them about what his presentation's gonna look like. Have you seen it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just in case.
It has a bunch of charts and graphs.
It's a lot of those charts and it walks through how 1 cent, 2 cent, how each of the cents would affect.
Doyle just flagged it in my email. He said it's a great presentation.
It looks very similar to
Right.
our graph.
Yeah, their budget's in pretty similar condition. I think the level of service, I mean, we have a pretty good level of service here for the maintenance of roadways and all of that.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So would you all like to make a recommendation? Well, maybe you don't want to, but would you be willing to make a recommendation to bring to the PSTA board an action item to just authorize public input on these service reductions?
Okay, yes.
If nothing else happens.
Do we need a motion,
Yeah.
or? Okay, I'll make a motion that we bring forward to the PSTA board the issues with regard to funding, and make a recommendation that we let PSTA move forward with public comment to determine best way to handle potential service reductions.
I'll second. Before we vote on that, don't you think it would be wise to temporarily put that on hold until we figure out potential options that we might have available to us for additional revenue? So that we can ask them which one they would prefer that we did.
Are you talking about the public?
Yeah.
No, I think that,
Well, then that's
I
what
think that
we're
might be
essentially asking, is just to go out to the public and let the public that are affected by these routes, I don't know if you can put that back up there, in these areas, know that we're looking at different options to keep the service running, but
Not only to keep it running, but to enhance it.
yeah, make it better. But especially in these areas where these folks may be without service unless something is done, is to get their input on that. I mean, as you know, there's no better way to get actual public input than to,
tell them you're gonna get something.
Yeah.
yeah.
The problem is, I'm not sure the public has any methodology to increase revenue.
And they don't know how to evaluate it either.
Right.
So I
that-
wouldn't ask them. They prefer.
Yeah.
And therein is the danger of a public meeting, because, you know, you're not dealing with folks normally that have a great deal of expertise on the issue, other than they know we need it.
Yeah.
But we can certainly work on it. So is that are we ready to vote on the motion?
Mm-hmm.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. You wanna talk about the board agenda?
Yes. So the two items that you just heard are 2/3 of our action items on the board agenda. The third action item will come to the planning committee as well. This was a request by the board at its last meeting to, at the request of District Secretary David Nguyen, to write a letter of support to prioritize the construction of an expanded State Road 16 Memorial Interchange as a top, as the region's top priority.
We did that, didn't we do it?
Yeah, we did. We did.
Huh?
You guys did it.
We did it on the county commission already.
Yeah.
Right, and then at our December PSTA meeting, you asked us to prepare a letter of recommendation, which is, I think the whole board approved that, or there was no concern. We just have the letter now.
Okay, good.
And that'll be on there. The other exciting thing that we'll have at the meeting, well, in addition to recognizing our new board member, we have had new board members at the last 3 meetings. Gina Driscoll is replacing Lisa Wheeler-Bowman on the PSTA board.
Mhm.
We're going to, I want to thank Commissioner Long and Doyle for working with, my understanding is Representative Balla, we're gonna have a little presentation, hopefully, of a flag, a United States flag, to one of our employees. Al Burns, our procurement director's son, is graduating from West Point,
Oh, cool.
the military academy, and we're going to be presenting him with a flag, which I understand is a thing, that was flown over the state capitol.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Charlie,
could-
you're probably good at one.
Yeah. Madam Chair?
Well, I think we worked with, thanks to Doyle, and there was a lot of work on this. And,
Well, yeah, because the woman that we started out working with retired
Hmm.
and didn't pass on the information that's what we wanted, so we had to kind of start all over again. But we're on track now. Just having a difficult time scheduling the presentation because of legislative schedule.
yeah, and we're gonna try to get, I don't know his name, but Al's son is gonna
His
lead
name
his
is
classes.
Alvin Jr.
Alvin Jr.? Okay.
Alvin III.
Al told me this morning that he talked to his English teacher and professor, and he's gonna be able to lead class, and we're gonna try to see if we can get a Skype or a.
Okay.
Too bad
From
we
West
could-
Point.
Cool, very cool. Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I'd like to go back for a second on that Route 60 recommendation.
Sure.
Heather, can you put up that slide with the routes, please?
Oh.
The 60 interchange,
I'm just trying to
Is
vision how much is in Pinellas and how much is in
None of it's
Hillsborough.
in
None of it's
Yeah.
in Pinellas, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
It's all in Hillsborough.
Yeah.
We're trying to be
Good
regional.
partners.
are you talking about the route cut list there?
No, no, I.
What would you,
There-
Heather?
so
Talking
the-
about the interchange, the
The
map?
memorial.
Yeah, the map that was up there, but that's only Pinellas County, so it's not gonna show what I'm asking. That's
No.
what I was trying to
I
visualize.
think, does it show over there?
Do I have a map? Oh, that map.
Yeah,
Oh.
see, it doesn't really show much of anything
Sure.
because it's all
Can you show
Pinellas.
them where it's right
Yeah.
there?
Yeah,
It's in
okay.
Hillsborough County.
Yeah,
It's right where you go over, get off and go to
Right.
the airport.
right.
Yeah.
Right now.
Take your life in your hands.
Right
Right.
now, as you know, there's 4 lanes on the Howard Franklin Bridge, and
Right.
they narrow down to 2 lanes to go under, right there, right under the underpass of the exit ramp to the
Right.
airport.
Right,
There is a project that FDOT has designed to expand that, so there's not that bottleneck of the 2 lanes.
mm-hmm,
The premium transit study that PSTA and TBARTA have all endorsed, and we're studying a critical path item to get that done, is widening that underpass, that whole interchange, to allow more width under that flyover to the airport.
mm-hmm,
So that's
Okay.
what this is about.
okay.
It's,
So
All right,
doesn't
so
do
this
anything, though,
will
when you come-
benefit northbound Pinellas drivers.
it greatly benefits
Okay.
Pinellas
Yeah.
and the whole region.
Yeah, okay.
Does it do anything for the mess when you come down off the overpass and you wanna go either to veterans or, I mean, I always hold my breath while I'm doing
Yeah,
that,
because you
that's
have to
scary.
cross the whole entire lane of
yeah.
ongoing.
Yeah,
And fast moving traffic.
I think it does. I mean, it's a
Seems like they,
pretty elaborate redo of that whole
oh, good, okay.
thing, and it's very expensive. It ends with a B.
Yeah, yeah, and time consuming.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
if you've
So
noticed, there's
multi-year
basically no
funding on
more
this?
right of way. The buildings, there's some
Hmm.
buildings right up
Right.
against the road.
Right.
So they would have to acquire those properties way,
Oh.
Yeah.
the price of them.
So this is gonna be a time consuming and expensive thing. But-
Secretary
okay.
Gwynn has been amazing.
So-
He has identified there is a short-term fix that is funded to somehow squeeze a third lane through,
That's nice.
which is great. And so FDOT is already planning on doing a third lane.
Okay.
But that's sort of like a temporary or fix thing.
Okay. All right, so what is our give up in terms of potential revenues and things like that out of our budget? Anything?
Well, Secretary Gwynn explained this at the Tea Barter meeting, but he said right around now, every year, the Region 7, the FDOT Region 7, the Tampa Bay region, basically is in a competition for statewide dollars for these major highway projects. Unfortunately, not transit, but highway projects, with the other regions, the other 6 regions. And so he is going around asking all the local governments, that's why he has Pinellas County and Hillsborough County and everybody for letters of support so that he could have ammunition when he goes and battles for these funds to allocate these funds to the Tampa Bay.
So did Hillsborough actually make it their priority?
I don't know.
I thought-
Yeah, they were
there
they're
was
the
some
ones that would benefit the most, but my
We'll find out.
suggestion would be is
They
if
can't
we're
get out of
gonna, if
their
we're
own
gonna have
way.
this, if we're gonna have this at the board meeting, then we have this map or even a better map
Oh, yeah.
to help people visualize how this is going to impact Pinellas County residents. Because,
Anybody who ever travels over that
yeah,
bridge.
yeah, which is all of us, but
Between Woodlawn
we
and
need
Aberdeen
to
and
make sure that we're not looking like we're giving away
Oh,
money
yeah,
for a
well,
local project, so that's the issue.
Doesn't hurt to make
Yeah,
the
so
secretary
we
happy,
need to help everybody visualize what the impact would be.
Yeah.
Okay,
I would
that's all I,
find it
that's all I
helpful
had to
if
say on
that
this.
traffic didn't get stopped halfway over the bridge.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right?
Okay.
And I understand that Representative Latvala cannot come on the 23rd. So, maybe this will have to be delayed.
Yeah, they're gonna be busy till March.
Yeah. He said he could come.
Okay.
So, anything else under reports and correspondence? Brad,
I don't think so.
future meeting subjects?
I don't think so. I think we'll have a discussion after the workshop is on the 18th.
And for other business, do you have any other business? I wanted to bring up the possibility that we could begin a discussion about rebranding BRT.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because the average folks think of BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, and they envision what they kind of grew up with the old clunky, big, heavy buses. And find a different acronym that more mirrors the innovative and creative way we are trying to move forward for the future with something that looks very streamlined and mirrors more like a train. And to that end, it occurred to me that if we put the right messaging around it, we could talk to the manufacturers of the train that, I keep showing everybody because I just think it's so fabulous. And it is autonomous and it runs on a dedicated highway following the red lines in the road. And we could put that on the current BRT line that we're talking from downtown St. Pete out to the beaches, and have it be a pilot project that people would just really love and enjoy, and kind of like the ferry, just ride it for the experience maybe. And then taking that idea even further, you could bring it up to a stop at Carillon, right over the Howard Franklin to the airport or into downtown Tampa. How about that?
What
We're
kind of
talking
provisions
autonomous?
I'm sorry?
what kind of a provision would we have, dedicated lane on the bridge, new bridge?
Well, that's what we've
Yeah.
been lobbying David Gwynn about, and I
Yeah.
think they've now decided, right, am I right? that they are gonna have a dedicated lane on the bridge?
Well, the conceptual design that was done by Scott Pringle and that the T-BARTA board approved has it running in a semi-dedicated, the toll lane across the bridge, and a dedicated lane, the rest of, in Pinellas, and then in the other areas along the shoulder. Or, it's not really the shoulder, it's really a dedicated lane now.
Mhm.
And so this idea, the technology that Commissioner Long's talking about is basically to have sort of an electric eye that follows a red, well, in the case of the video, it's red, I guess it could be other colors, a line, a visual line on in a corridor. So you don't need tracks, but it won't deviate off that line. So that's the idea. I mean, it can be autonomous in that way.
And so.
It acts just like a train.
If it connected to wherever the new intermodal transit center is gonna be in downtown Tampa, then Brightline is coming from Orlando to Tampa.
Mhm.
And I talked with the Brightline people yesterday
Mhm.
about how interested might they be in, this is very, philosophical, but how interested might they be if they could transition at that transit center to a lighter rail type of vehicle, like what I just talked about, that would follow the red lines and come all the way across the bridge, stop at Caroline, because it's a big employment center, and come right down to St. Pete into the Tropicana field development that we know is gonna go on there, and potentially right into a brand new little mini stadium, potentially, for the
Right,
race.
right.
That mitigates their argument about not being able to bring enough people to the
Right.
games.
Mhm.
Because now they could come all the way from Miami on a high-speed train,
Mhm.
zip right over.
Mhm.
Isn't that a great idea?
Sure.
That's great.
And was there receptivity by?
Very much,
Excellent.
Mm.
very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
race would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to
Um,
them too.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
But I need to
All
make
right.
sure that there's a lane for it on this interchange that they're gonna build
Yes.
to the
Mhm.
airport.
Yeah.
It's gonna
Yeah.
start happening pretty soon, right? But wouldn't that make sense?
Well, this David Gwynn is lobbying for this funding now. There's
Yeah, I know.
it's several years out.
Okay. Well,
Hopefully he'll be successful, and then
then we can talk about an extra.
but my idea is not several years out, if we can get
Oh, right.
enough partners to the table. And thus far, I haven't talked with anyone that has thought it was a dumb idea or that it was not doable, given that we do it right.
yeah,
So,
Okay.
All right.
it's pretty neat.
anything else?
Fine then. Nope.
Yep.
Okay. Any further comments or news or
Got a lot of exciting stuff.
for the good of the order? We do have some incredibly dynamic and futuristic things going on. And if we could just get the federal government to put their act
Yeah.
together. And by the way, I hope you all saw that Congressman Chris got appropriations.
Yes.
Good.
We haven't had anyone
Holy
from
shit.
Florida on appropriations since Congressman Young passed away.
Right.
Mhm.
So this is a huge opportunity, not only for Pinellas County, but for PSTA and T-BARTA and the region and the whole state.
Yeah.
Mm. Good.
He'll be the new John Micah.
That would be
Yeah, now
amazing.
as long as he stays there.
Well,
Doesn't decide he wants to do something else.
no, we just have to make sure he likes it. Right now, he loves it. Of course, he's in the majority.
Right.
No, and
What's
now.
not to love now, right?
And Harry told me and there's a whole bunch of subcommittees of the Appropriations Committee.
Mm.
And guess who's on transportation? Rick Scott.
Yeah.
In the Senate. Oh, but actually it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but just, we'll have to go
Because,
visit him.
well, it doesn't matter to us, because transit is actually handled by the Senate Banking Committee.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Economic Development.
Well, besides that, he's involved in Brightline, so he may have a little bit more.
He might be
On the House side, Harry is trying to do whatever he can to see if Congressman Chris could be put onto the Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee as well.
As,
That'd be great.
and if he could be there as chair, that'd be even better, which is why I think we need to go up there and have a chit chat with Nancy.
Right. Mm.
I'm serious, stop laughing.
Okay.
What are you laughing
He
for?
said the subcommittee, Harry told me that the subcommittees would be announced in the next couple of weeks.
Hmm.
Cool.
Who's Nancy?
All right.
Pelosi.
Oh, oh. That man.
That Nancy.
Mm. Yeah.
Right, Brad, we could go talk to her.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you can get
Have
an
you ever met
appointment.
her? Have you ever met her?
No, but it'd be hard to get an appointment. She's a little busy right now.
All right.
Well, if the meetings that she attends keep getting canceled like right away, then she'll have some time on
Yeah,
her,
right.
open time on her calendar.
Right.
And we can just go right
Just
back to
schedule
her.
We're gonna
schedule it
zip up
right
there
after her
right
next
now.
meeting with Trump.
Yeah. All right.
Love that. All right.
Okay.
All right, we good?
Yep.
Then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Sorry we
Thank you.
got started late.
I was going to save me from a C-SPAN.
You were gonna call me. That Mike's calling.
Do you ladies have a problem? You don't have a meeting.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I think the camera's.
See you guys.
See ya.
From the airport.
Bye.
Thanks, see ya.
Did you get that already? I don't think so, did I? Indiana? Did I give you anything?
I don't recall.
Let me look into it. I thought we had already, got it already.
Yeah, I've done a lot of those lately.
Yeah, let me check into it, 'cause I do remember